Turn of the century, the year 2000, 2001, financial calamity ensues in many different areas. We have Y2K problems. We've got the tech bubble meltdown. We have the 9/11 situation. You're in the financial industry, Russell. It's a weird time to be in the industry. And in the midst of all of that, you and your son, who's helped joined you in the business, have created an innovation to help support you, the way that you serve your clients and your clients directly. So what was happening around you with all these changing environments in a very short time frame? First of all, what was the feeling of going through that, like being in the financial sector and recognizing, okay, not only might this have an impact on your business, but fundamentally it has an impact on the people that you serve. And being in the financial space myself, I recognize that we can develop we develop a care for the people that we serve that I think often they just don't understand.
So a little bit of context in addition to the world going upside down at that particular time. A perfect storm, I think, is what some people might have called that. And also, and again, for where the technology in those days was pretty primitive relative to what's available right at the moment. And there was also a sort of a transition because in the 80s, many clients, the retail clients were very conditioned towards GICs with high interest rates and so on. So there's a transition from GICs to mutual funds, and all of a sudden, the guarantees weren't there anymore. So there was a lot of angst around performance. So that
interest
was
rates
an
were
issue.
still declining at that point at a fairly
Yes.
rapid pace from where they were at a peak
Absolutely.
level, I believe, even
Yeah.
in late 80s and the 90s, and they were trending downward had been for quite almost a decade, basically.
Yeah. So there was definitely a need and a movement into the what was most prevalent at that particular point, which mutual funds. Lots of things have changed so that's the context of that. And performance was king in terms of in clients' minds. Okay, it's all about performance. They were kind of used to good interest rates, and now they're in a situation where, oh my goodness, they could have some loss and so on. So that was a very difficult time for people in financial services. The only worse time than that was 2009 with the meltdown that happened in terms of the mortgage crisis. So that was a similar one, but a different context. But again, the innovation I'm going to talk about handled both of those, okay? And it will handle any kind of situation going forward. And it really boils down to two things as far as the client is concerned. Number one would be confidence, okay? And confidence in any market. And number two would be engagement. All right. So that they're engaged with the process as opposed to being an observer of the process. They're part of the team. And again, that was unusual back then because there was so much of that was new. So what basically we had done, and I'll give you the context of that as well. There was one of our clients who, I would tell him how this mutual fund was doing and that mutual fund was doing. And he'd say, Russell, I want to know how I'm doing. And there was no way that the industry could do that. There was nothing around. And I don't think they could really do that very well now either, because, if a client moves from provider to provider, then all of that detail is lost. So my son being, very much more tech oriented than I am, was pretty good with spreadsheets, and he developed this, what we call the profit tracker. So what was innovative about this at the time, and still is that it was about profit. So what happens in the industry, and was happening very prevalently back then, was the results that were reported, you never knew whether they were before fees or after fees. So, that really mattered to clients, and there was all kinds of different ways of, positioning mutual funds at the time. And so our decision was, we want to make it pure profit. So this is the money that you would have in your jeans or in your skirt or whatever the thing is, and the only thing that might be taken away from that would be taxes, and so that made it very, very clear and consistent. And what we do with that is that we report that at each meeting, and we also have an annual report. This is the page that mostly they focus on, and there's a couple of things here that are important. So first of all, when we report progress, we do it in dollars because some people relate to dollars. Okay. We also report it in percentage because some people engage or are connected more to percentage. So they have their choice in terms of how that's presented. And people have frames of reference with regard to that. Sometimes if the performance is good, they'll say, well, gee whiz, that's a whole year's salary. So that's the kind of way that people tend to look at those kinds of things. Whereas the percentage lends itself to comparison with outside things. So that gives them choice in terms of that. We also track this with the other thing that people are concerned about. I put some money in. Is that reflected in there? I took some money out. Is that reflected in there? And so it does. It's always after all of the adjustments that are made in their portfolio. So it's real in the moment when we do it. So that's important. The other thing is the pie chart. And not everybody likes a pie chart, but they sure like a pie chart which has a lot of green on it, which says profit. And so that's a visual thing that just absolutely connects with a piece of them that says, wow, okay. And it doesn't really matter so much how much time it's taken, but half of it is profit. And the way we do it, and I know there's a little bit of, one could criticize that, but effectively at some point, it's going to be all profit. We assume, okay, that all the capital is taken out and all the profit is left in. That isn't actually how it works, but it technically that is effectively what has happened. So those are the kinds of things that engage people, and they have questions about it. And you always know when they're engaged because they have questions about it. We love the questions that don't always aren't always necessarily the kinds of question we'd like to have, but we do like them because they make us smarter. And also, helps them to understand a little bit better.
This is creating a very simple version of awareness. It's clarifying that awareness where it can all be seen in one simple format, and it's highlighting, hey, negatives, positives, the amalgamation of things. What does this mean to you in this moment? And then let's look back in time at previous moments to see how it's progressed. So there's a progressionary component there. You mentioned when people would move from a provider to a provider, you lose all that history, and that is very true. So it's hard to see where are you actually at over an aggregated period of time. And this is something that you've identified where this really sets things apart from an innovative perspective, where you're maintaining this clarity of that history so you can really see what the true progression is over a long time span.
This is the other thing which is extraordinary. And that is to say, okay, right back to the day that you walked in or the day we started tracking, because we had clients before we started tracking, there's your history. And then we got the notion. I mean, this was significant. Initially, we didn't have those green things on there, and so there was just the numbers. And then one day, for whatever reason, Stefan highlighted all the positive ones, and therefore, then what they can see at a glance is, okay, it's true what they say. Market goes up and down, and there's all the ones that are positive and the ones that are negative. And guess what? In my particular case, I've got lots more positives than I do negatives. So all of those things feed into a sense of progress, a sense of confidence, and doesn't get into that sort of negative space of thinking that, the world is coming to an end, or whoever else, they're not going to have enough money to retire, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really quite extreme.
Sky is falling,
absolutely.
as the news media would have you believe on every headline.
Yeah.
One thing I really love about this, Russell, that I'd like to point out that I see and I think is innovative is to clarify and identify what are the components of major events that occurred or would have maybe been an impact. So you do have, we talked about, 2001, the tech bubble, these things having a direct impact. Subprime lending crisis, of course, we know the impact that had, which was drastic. It was a global impact. U.S. debt crisis. We have, currency oil supply, which from a Canadian perspective is maybe even more of an issue than it is for other areas.
Yeah.
You have some presidential race scenarios here, Brexit, all of these components, COVID-19, these scenarios have a direct impact on the monetary system. And these geopolitical type events are not controllable by any financial advisor, any individual person.
Right.
They're
Right.
aggregate in nature and they're outside of our purview. So we're always trying to do, how can we do our best within these changing environments? And so the fact that you identify those and also relate that to the correlation of how did that impact things potentially, but those all become great discussion points that you can then have, a direct, real conversation with your client about and what you saw transpire, and not just maybe with their portfolio, but with an aggregate portfolio that you see, in the overall marketplace. Really, truly a great way to summarize what's going on and putting it in real world terms, real dollars. From my perspective, one thing that I've seen being in the financial space for some time is a lack of correlation between what a market does and what the behavior of the individual does. And so here, what I see taking place in the way that this is presented is you're showing how both of those things have an impact. The deposits, the ongoing contributions to a plan, whatever that looks like, but also the utilization and withdrawals of a plan. Those utilization and withdrawals can have a drastic impact. And they also have reasons and rationale. And so there's probably a great level of conversation that you can have with your clients as that takes place also.
In a world of jargon, it's profit. Everybody understands what a profit is. Yeah. So it's been amazing, really, in terms of the impact that that's had on our business. And it's led to a client loyalty beyond anything I would ever have imagined.
Amazing. Now, there's another innovation we're going to talk about as we come back after these incredible messages.